Choices from Struggle to Strength. This is Ruth L. Snyder, and I'm very pleased to have Deborah Butterfield with us today. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Ruth. Glad to be here.
So, Deborah, tell us a little bit about what you are passionate about and why.
I am passionate about helping writers get published and to become a better writer. And why? I think just because, for one, I love to teach. And when I decided to do this, to be a writer, I did find a group online on Facebook that kind of helped me learn some of the ins and outs, but there really wasn't a lot out there at the time. I mean, we're talking pre-Create Space days, 2006, 2005, in that era. And so I want to be able to just pay it forward, so to speak, and help other writers learn the things that I've learned much more quickly than it took me to learn them. So.
Yes, if we can learn from other people's mistakes, we don't need to make our own mistakes.
School of Hard Knocks, right?
Right. So, share a bit about your story and some of the difficult events that you have experienced.
Well, my most difficult story distinctly is when I learned that my husband was sexually abusing my daughter. This was my second husband, and so it was his stepdaughter. But that definitely hands down wins,
Mm.
the struggle category. It took a lot of time to work through it. Um, because essentially, I mean, my husband had betrayed me, but he had hurt my daughter. So I'm wounded from two sides and having to deal with, the betrayal of my husband and the hurt that my daughter is suffering. And
Right.
so, so yeah, definitely was the hardest one. But that struggle is really what opened the door for me to do what I'm doing now, because um, afterwards, I got a job at Focus on the Family, and they eventually learned about my struggle. They actually helped me heal. I mean, they loved me like Christ says to love um, your neighbor,
Hmm.
and helped me heal through all of that process. And they encouraged me to write a book when it was time. Um, so that's how I got where I am today, really.
Hmm. Not a journey that you would choose.
No, definitely not for anyone. Um, it's not as difficult as the death of a child, but it is still very difficult. And whether it was a family member that
Hmm.
was the perpetrator or not, it still really cuts to the heart of every mom,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, because your child's been hurt.
Right. And sexuality is such an intimate thing.
Yeah,
So, was
definitely.
there a particular time during the struggle of working through all of this that you knew you had a very important choice to make?
Right. Yeah. Right from the beginning, I knew that if I was going to get through it all, that I was going to have to trust the Lord and hang on to Him. And
Mm.
He made that even more plain, as the months wore on, there were just more struggles added onto it. I mean, like 1 month after my husband was carted off to jail, my oldest son was doing stuff in his bedroom in the basement, and I mean, he was a teenager,
Hmm.
16 years old. You think he would know better, but he did a lot of camping and was with the search and rescue team in Colorado Springs. And somehow, I don't know, he had his little propane tank or gas filled. He had a tank for his campfire stoves, and he lit the tank on fire for some reason. I don't remember all the details. I only remember that he tried to carry that little tube of propellant that was burning to the bathroom to throw it in the toilet, and it got too hot before he got there, and he dropped it, and all that fluid spilled out onto the floor, and torched the basement. So
Wow.
fortunately, we lived close enough to the fire department that they got there very quickly, and there was only smoke damage upstairs, but it was just one struggle on top of another on top of another. And then that same son ended up going to jail himself 3
Mm,
months after all this other stuff started. So I
mm,
got to a point where I told the Lord one morning, I said, Father, I don't know if I can deal with one more thing.
mhm,
And I said, I'm only can do this if you are there to help me through this. And
mhm.
I think it was like the very next day, it might have even been later that day when my son ended up going to jail. And the Lord carried me through it. I surprisingly had a peace about it all that I know came from the Lord. It couldn't have come from anywhere else. It honestly couldn't have. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Yes, those times we just throw our hands up and say, Lord,
yeah.
carry us because we just can't make another step, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty miserable. On that, I don't know, they have those stress scales, new job, married, to a new child. I mean, I was off the chart as far as the stress I was having to deal
Right,
with. And
right.
I only got through it because of the Lord.
Hmm.
There's just no other explanation.
So, other than prayer, what do you have any tips that you would share for people who are off the scale with stress?
They have to give themselves grace. They have
Mm,
to have that quiet time with the Lord. I honestly don't know how anybody who's not, doesn't believe in the Lord could get through stress like that.
mhm,
Most, and then there's a lot of people that turn to drugs or alcohol or other things. But for me, it was just having that quiet time with Him every morning. And then I spent my time reading the Psalms. I got to know the
mm,
Psalms really well, and they
mhm,
helped me. I'm seeing David just pouring out his heart to God, and I learned to do the same thing. So
mm,
um, you have to give yourself grace. Take one day at a time,
mhm,
and the Bible encourages us to do the same thing. I mean, tomorrow's going to have its own troubles. Don't worry about tomorrow. Just deal with today.
mhm.
Just deal with today.
So, as a writer, did you journal or do anything like that to work through some of the issues that you were dealing with?
That I honestly don't remember if I journaled through that time or not.
Mm,
Um, I not like I journal now. I can tell you that much.
mhm,
I probably had, you know, I probably had days when I did journal. Um, Mostly I just talked to the Lord and read His Word.
mhm.
Journaling probably would have been a good thing, but
Did you have a supportive community? You mentioned focus on the family. Was there anybody else that just helped carry you through that time?
well, and I didn't come to focus on the family until 3 years after it all started.
Mm,
I was at that point where I was like, okay, I've got to get a job because I was a stay-at-home mom when it all happened. I did have several women from the church that I attended that were very supportive.
mm,
For the most part, mm, I would say for the first year that I was dealing with it all, very few people knew I was dealing with it because I wasn't telling anyone.
mm.
It's not something that you go out, and publicize. I'm not,
Broadcast on the street. Yeah.
know, and it's not something that necessarily is posted in a newspaper like an obituary would. So there were a lot of people who really didn't know what was going on until long after it
Mm,
occurred. And I finally was brave enough to tell some people. But I know there were two specific women who prayed with me and and walked with me through the worst part of it.
mm. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Well, as far as the struggle is concerned, one of the most important things that I learned was about the forgiveness. And I knew I had to forgive my husband. there were things I had to forgive my daughter for because as she was healing, um, there were things that she did. I mean, she just lashed out at me. She
Mm,
blamed me
mhm,
more for the problem than she did her stepdad because it was like, "Mom, you were supposed to protect me."
mhm,
And it took a long time for me to help her understand that how could I protect her from something I didn't know was happening.
mhm,
So it took a long time for the Lord to work with me with the forgiveness. I did a lot of studying on what forgiveness actually was
mhm,
and learned that, forgiveness is a choice, plain and simple. It's a choice. So
mhm.
even if I felt like, even if I still felt angry at him, that didn't necessarily mean that I had not forgiven him.
Right.
But also, and this crept up on me probably 4, maybe 5 years after it all started. I realized that I had grown bitter about some things.
Mhm,
I'd grown bitter toward my husband. And so there again, it was like, okay, there's things that I needed to forgive him in. And I confessed that bitterness um, during a devotional time at Focus on the Family one morning.
mm,
And I was amazed that just that act of confessing the bitterness
mhm,
allowed the Holy Spirit to bring healing
mhm,
and release from it. And that, I realized that like a couple of days after, it was like, wow, I could sense it was gone. I just knew the bitterness was gone. And I knew that my confession of it was key to
mhm,
getting rid of it.
mhm.
So it's yeah, it's very important that you forgive and that you examine yourself for bitterness that might have taken root and get rid of it because it's going to poison the rest of your life if you don't.
Mm. Do you agree with the statement somebody has said that bitterness, we think that we're punishing the other person, but we're actually punishing ourselves?
I do. I mean, I had absolutely no interaction with my husband. He was in jail for 4 years, and after that, he moved away. He went back to where he grew up, and I was living in Colorado. And um, so, I mean, my bitterness was not affecting him in any way,
Mm.
shape, or form.
Mhm.
We weren't even speaking, so it's not like I was, talking to him over the phone and chewing him out or anything like that. So yes, definitely that bitterness was hurting me, not him.
Mhm. You've talked a little bit or referenced your writing, and you're also an editor. Tell us more about your journey in your writing and editing.
Well, I had always wanted to be a writer, but like a lot of things, it's like, well, gotta, grow up and get a real job. Um, and so I went for many years. I mean, I was 45 when I finally decided I'm going to do something about my writing.
Mm,
That was part of why I took the job at Focus on the Family because I thought that a job there might help lead me to that dream.
mhm,
And then while I was working there, I did get a job as a copywriter for them. But then also they encouraged me to write a book.
mhm,
And it was in, I believe, 2006. So we're talking 12 years after it all happened that I sat down to write a book to help mothers
mm,
that were going through the same thing I was. I mean, there was nothing on the book market at all for moms.
mm,
There's a lot of books out there that help the abused
mhm,
person
mhm,
gain healing, but I couldn't find anything for mothers.
mm.
I was like, hey, we're hurting too, we need
Yes.
healing too. And so I wrote my first book. That was my first book. And in 2015, I revised it, I doubled it in size, and retitled it as well. And it has, I've never counted how many copies it sold, but I have been contacted by many women to say, thank you so much. This book has
Mm,
helped me so
mhm,
much
mhm,
because it helps them. lead them through the emotional journey and gives them practical advice on how to deal with this and how to deal with that, and things that may be coming down the pike. So that was really how I entered the world, the full-time world of being a writer.
Mm. So what would you say to somebody who wants to write but just hasn't dipped their toes into that yet?
I would say dip your toe. I mean, don't even dip your toe. Just sit down or get on the diving board and dive in. Sit down at your computer and start writing. Um, or pick up a tablet and a pen or a pencil and start writing that way. I know a lot of people who actually write the traditional way rather than at a computer. You just have to start.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just no other way to do it. You just start.
I have a lot of people in my audience who struggle with marketing. Do you have any tips that helped you with marketing?
Marketing. Oh gosh.
We could probably do a whole other interview on that.
Oh, that's my weak spot. A lot of writers tend to hate the marketing because I don't know, there's something about writers and being introverts and it's struggling to reach out to people. Find something that you are comfortable with doing as far as marketing and start with that.
Can you
So
give
that,
an example?
well, an email list. I mean, reaching out to people via email is certainly seems a lot safer than reaching out to somebody face to face.
Right.
And so you may find that you just are comfortable with that. So, start by building an email list and reaching people through an email list. And once you get comfortable with that one thing, then you can begin to add other things that might stretch you. But definitely, I think that would be the best place to start, would be to start with something that you feel comfortable and confident in doing, because then you're not constantly looking for something to procrastinate with because, gee, I just,
Writers don't do that, do they?
it's like that. Is the water freezing cold? Is it boiling hot? Dipping your toe in. When when you're looking at something that you feel comfortable and confident with, you are less likely to want to find something to procrastinate with.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Thank you. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Deborah?
The best way is my website, themotivationaleditor.com. I have a contact form there. I have a blog with hundreds of articles on how to write and marketing and such. I've been blogging there since 2012. Wow, 10 years.
Wow.
I didn't stop to think about that.
Throw a
Time.
party.
Anniversary. It goes by so fast. I mean, even the struggle with my ex-husband and my daughter, that's been almost 30 years ago. I was thinking about it this morning as I prepared for this interview, and I thought, man, it seems like it was almost, not quite yesterday, but it doesn't seem like it was almost 30 years ago. It really doesn't.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and for being willing to share some of your struggles with us. Like I said, it's not anything you would wish on anybody else, but God does use everything in our lives. He doesn't waste any pain. And thank you for being willing to share and help other people who are going through a similar circumstance.
You're welcome.